Top 7 lessons people learn too late in life. Nobody warns you properly. That is the thing about the most important lessons in life. They are not hidden. They have been said before, many times by many people. You have probably heard versions of them already. But hearing a lesson and actually understanding it are two completely different things. And understanding it and living by it are further apart still. Most of these lessons arrive on time. The problem is that we are rarely ready to receive them until we have already paid for them. These are the 7 lessons people learn too late in life, and why they matter before it is too late. Number 7. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. Not in the way the phrase is usually meant, as a dismissal of other people, or as an excuse for not caring how your behavior affects them, but in the specific sense that most of what other people think about you, they are not thinking about you at all. Research on what psychologists call the spotlight effect, documented extensively by Thomas Gilovich and colleagues at Cornell University, found that people consistently overestimate how much attention others pay to their appearance, behavior, and mistakes. In study after study, participants believed far more people noticed and remembered their embarrassing moments, their clothing choices, their slip-ups, than actually did. The reason is simple. Everyone else is also at the center of their own experience, running their own version of the same spotlight in reverse. The amount of mental and emotional energy spent managing, worrying about, and adjusting to the imagined opinions of others is one of the most significant sources of unnecessary suffering in adult life. Most of it is spent on an audience that is not watching nearly as closely as assumed. And even when they are watching, they move on far faster than you will. Number 6. The relationship you have with time is the relationship you have with your life. Most people treat time as a resource they will have more of later. They spend their 20s preparing for their 30s. They spend their 30s establishing themselves for their 40s. They are waiting for some future moment when things will be less busy, less stressful, more settled, and then the real living will begin. That moment has a way of not arriving. Research on what psychologists call temporal discounting, the well-documented tendency to value present moments less than future ones, suggests that this is not purely a failure of discipline. It is a feature of how human brains process time. The future always feels like it will be more spacious than the present. But when the future arrives, it becomes the present, and the present is always full. Author and palliative care nurse Bronnie Ware, who spent years sitting with people in the final weeks of their lives and recording their most common regrets, found that one of the most frequently expressed was the feeling that life had passed without their full participation. Not that they had done the wrong things, but that they had been too distracted, too deferred, too somewhere else, while the actual life they were living was happening around them. The time you have is not a waiting room. It is the destination. Number 5. Most arguments are not about what they appear to be about. 2 people are arguing about the dishes, or the budget, or who forgot to make the appointment. And the argument is real, and the frustration is real, but the argument is rarely actually about the dishes. Beneath most recurring conflicts in close relationships is something that is much harder to name and much more vulnerable to admit: the feeling of not being seen, of not mattering enough, of not being valued in the way you need to be valued. The surface issue is the presenting complaint. The real issue is underneath it. Research on Please Conflict by psychologist John Gottman, whose work tracking relationship dynamics across decades has become foundational in the field, found that the content of an argument is almost never the most important thing about it. What matters is the underlying emotional dynamic, whether each person feels heard, respected, and cared for. Relationships where those underlying needs are met can sustain enormous amounts of surface conflict. Relationships where they are not met will eventually fracture, regardless of how reasonable the surface arguments become. Learning this lesson late means spending years fighting about the wrong things. Learning it earlier means asking more often, what is this argument actually about? And then having that conversation instead. Number 4. Discipline is not about willpower. It is about design. Most people approach self-improvement as a matter of trying harder. They set goals and then rely on motivation and willpower to carry them through. And when they fall short, which almost everyone does, They conclude that the problem was insufficient effort or insufficient character. The research says otherwise. Behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg, whose work on habit formation has been extensively studied and replicated, found that motivation is the least reliable component of behavior change. Motivation fluctuates. It peaks after an inspiring moment and craters when life gets difficult. The people who maintain consistent positive behaviors over time are not typically the people with the most willpower. They are the people who have designed their environment so that the desired behavior is the easiest available option. James Clear, building on this and related research in his widely read work on habits, describes the principle as friction reduction, making the behaviors you want to do easier and the behaviors you want to avoid harder. The person who exercises consistently is often not more disciplined. They sleep in their workout clothes. Their gym bag is by the door. The decision was made before the morning arrived. Learning this lesson late means years of blaming yourself for failures that were actually failures of design. Learning it earlier means building the environment first and letting the behavior follow. Number 3. The quality of your life is largely determined by the quality of your relationships. Not your achievements, not your income, not your status or your productivity or the efficiency with which you manage your time. The clearest predictor of human well-being, across culture, across class, across almost every measure researchers have used, is the quality of the relationships a person maintains. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, one of the longest-running studies of human life, followed the same group of people for over 80 years across multiple generations. Its conclusions, summarized by longtime study director Robert Waldinger, were striking in their simplicity. The people who were happiest and healthiest in old age were not the ones who had achieved the most or earned the most. They were the ones who had maintained warm, close relationships throughout their lives. Loneliness, the study found, is as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Chronic loneliness is associated with accelerated cognitive decline, weakened immune function, and significantly shorter life expectancy. Most people spend a majority of their waking hours on work and productivity, and fit relationships around the edges. The research suggests this is exactly backwards. Relationships are the main event. Everything else is the context in which they happen. Number 2. You will not regret the risks you took. You will regret the ones you did not. This is one of the most frequently reported findings in research on end-of-life regret, and one of the least heeded while there is still time to act on it. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, whose research into human happiness and regret has been among the most influential in the field, found that people are significantly more likely to regret an action than action over the long term. In the short term, actions that go wrong feel worse than opportunities missed. But as time passes, the calculus inverts. The failed attempt fades. The missed opportunity stays. Bronnie Ware, in her research with dying patients, found that the most common category of regret was not the things people had done. It was the things they had not done. The career they did not pursue. The relationship they did not repair. The place they did not go. The version of themselves they had kept safely in reserve, waiting for a more suitable moment that never came. The risk feels enormous in the moment it is taken. It almost never feels as large in memory. And the thing not risked grows larger with time, not smaller. Number 1. You are not your thoughts. This is the lesson that arrives last for most people, and the one that changes the most when it finally does. For most of a human life, a person experiences their thoughts as themselves. The anxious thought is not a thought passing through. It is evidence that there is something wrong. The self-critical voice is not a voice. It is the truth. The story the mind tells about who you are, what you deserve, and what is possible for you feels like reality, not like a story. It is a story. Research on mindfulness-based therapies, beginning with the work of Kabat-Zinn in the 1970s and expanded through decades of clinical research, has found that one of the most transformative shifts available to human beings is the recognition that thoughts are events in the mind, not facts about the world, and certainly not facts about the self. The anxious thought is not evidence of danger. The self-critical voice is not a neutral reporter. The mind is telling you a story. And like all stories, it can be observed without being believed. Cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy all operate on a version of this insight. The content of the thought matters less than the relationship you have with it. Distance from your own thinking is not detachment. It is clarity. Most people spend decades believing every thought they have about themselves. And somewhere along the way, usually at great cost, they discover that they do not have to. That the story is not the self. That the voice is not the truth. And that the distance between what your mind says and what is actually real is where most of your freedom lives.